discussing in lower house, upper house, and also with president signatures. Once the laws are passed, and can these be stayed by the Supreme Court? That is question number one. And question number two is, uh, so much effort goes in by the representative of people, and then Supreme Court basically stays on such laws. So I think that is what we want to discuss today.
Right, absolutely. So, yes, in a democratic setup, there is separation of powers with regards to the judiciary, executive, and the legislature. And it is properly separated and it is not intermixed. So, yes, when you say that a lot of efforts go in, a law is enacted by an entire procedure which is followed, and thereafter the enactment passes when the president gives his assent, and then it becomes the law. Certainly, that is the job and object of the legislature. And when they have done it, they've passed the law after so much deliberation and after taking so many factors which go into it. And also the fact that these farm laws which have been passed were to liberalize the farm sector. And that was done, which was required, which was suggested by several committees, which was recommended by a lot of expert bodies. And it would liberalize the farm sector, which is necessary, in my opinion, as well. And also the International Monetary Fund giving out a statement saying that these farm laws are beneficial for the future of this country. And certainly we have seen the effect of market economy now that India is, and the effect and the growth that we have seen in last around 20 years. Certainly market economy is the way ahead, and every sector gradually should be brought into this market forces of the market. But with regards to the protests that are going on, certainly whenever a new change comes in, there will be protests from some quarters of this country, and the best way to deal with it is to give time to these new laws, because we've seen since 1991, since we opened up our economy, there have been protests going on since that time when the market was liberalized. But gradually now, all those people who have been protesting are also aware of the benefits of this liberalization policy. And therefore, in this new farm laws liberalizing the farm sector, if they had been given the chance to be implemented and to be seen its effect, then probably the agitators would have also seen the benefits. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court has stayed the implementation of these three farm acts which were passed in 2020. But what appears to be the reason behind saying this, undoubtedly, it's an unprecedented act which has been order which has been passed by the Supreme Court. Because generally, it is Supreme Court's orders itself, judgments, that not to stay the implementation of the act. Because once it has been passed by proper procedure, there is a constitutional presumption that these laws are valid and they are not infringing any of the fundamental or constitutional rights guaranteed under the Constitution. But the factors what weighed in before the Supreme Court by passing this unprecedented order has been recorded in its order dated 12th of January. And what it says is that there were three categories of petitions which came up before the Supreme Court. The first category of petition was challenging the validity of these three farm acts by the agitators and unions of farmers. The second set of petitions was with regards to those unions of farmers which said that these farm laws are good and they should not be held as invalid. And the third set of petition were filed by individuals and residents of Delhi and neighboring states, complaining that due to these agitations, their right to freedom of movement across the country is violated. Because these agitators have been blocking the roads which enter Delhi, and therefore residents' rights to movement is infringed, and therefore they should agitate, because agitation and protesting is also a fundamental right. But there has to be a place, a ground, a dedicated area where these protests should go on, and it should not be in a way that it violates the normal life of the city. So these three petitions came up. The Supreme Court also observed that the agitators have been agitating and protesting in a peaceful manner. And the Supreme Court appreciates that. And it says that laudably the farmers have so far carried on the agitation peacefully and without any untoward incident. So it recognizes that the protests are going on in a very peaceful manner. But what it also, what was alleged is that some unions and some members are planning an tractor rally on 26th of January to disrupt the Republic Day function in Delhi. To which also some unions and their lawyers denied, saying that we would never do it because every family, one member from Punjab or Haryana is in army. They would never disrupt the Republic Day function, which is carried out in Delhi. But still, there were reports, and it was confirmed by the Attorney General that some banned organizations are funding and wanting disruption. And therefore, that was the allegation which was made before the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court also observes that negotiations have been going on, protests have been going on since September, and they are not fructifying. There is no result coming out. There is no way that conciliation or negotiation seems to be going on successfully. And therefore, Supreme Court was of the opinion that a committee of experts have to be formed and both the sides have to submit and represent before this committee and let the committee make a report and submit it to the Supreme Court. So in order to do that, the Supreme Court constituted a committee of 4 persons who are experts in this field. Those 4 persons are Shri Bhupinder Singh Mann, who is the National President, Bharatiya Kisan Union and All India Kisan Coordination Committee. Second is Dr. Pramod Kumar Joshi, who is Agricultural Economist, Director of South Asia International Food Policy Research Institute. Third is Shri Ashok Gulati, who is the Agricultural Economist and former Chairman of the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. And fourth is Shri Anil Bhanwat, who is the President, Shetkari Sangathan. So the Supreme Court constituted by appointing these 4 members in the committee and has directed the committee to allow all these unions to make representation and hear them and come out with a solution and ultimately file a report within 2 months from the date of first meeting of this committee. Finally, the Supreme Court also observes in its order, and I think this is the why the Supreme Court has granted stay in an unprecedented manner. What the Supreme Court states is that while we may not stifle a peaceful protest, we think that this extraordinary order of stay of implementation of the farm laws will be perceived as an achievement of the purpose of such protest, at least for the present, and will encourage the farmers' bodies to convince their members to get back to their livelihood, both in order to protect their own lives and health, in order to protect the lives and properties of others. So this fact is what has been weighed by the Supreme Court in order to stay that the Supreme Court observes that it doesn't want to stifle a protest, but it also thinks necessary that life and property of those who are protesting is also at risk, because we've seen a lot of members dying during this protest, some committing suicide. There are women, elderly person, there are children who are on the streets in this cold winter and also during this pandemic. So there is threat to their life. There is also threat to life and property of other residents of the city of Delhi and neighboring states. So therefore, in order to convince the members who are protesting, the Supreme Court has given a stay so that they have some confidence in the Apex Court as well as in this committee which has been constituted by the Apex. And therefore, to gain their confidence, the Supreme Court has granted this stay. But undoubtedly, it's an unprecedented order, not seen before. And the Supreme Court normally doesn't grant stay. But because of these circumstances, the Supreme Court might have thought that this is the best way to handle the situation at the moment. And thereafter, the Supreme Court will consider the constitutionality. But also, the Supreme Court in its order has not touched upon the merits. It has not heard the arguments of the councils on the validity of the act. Because an act enacted by the parliament is not final. Ultimately, if it is challenged, it is for the Supreme Court to decide whether the act violates any of the fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution, and therefore the final say is of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can ultimately declare an act to be ultra-virus or unconstitutional if it finds that it violates any of the guarantees which are granted by the Constitution under Part 3 of the Constitution. So therefore, the Supreme Court will decide, but Supreme Court normally doesn't grant stay of these acts which are challenged, and therefore this is unprecedented. But it seems that these are the reasons what made before the Supreme Court while passing this order staying the implemented. But certainly there was an argument made by an advocate who represented 15 unions from 15 different states of this country who submitted that don't grant stay because this will affect because we have already implemented and we have placed orders with regards to fruits and vegetables. So the Supreme Court said that with regards to minimum support price that will remain, otherwise the implementation of these acts would be stayed. So certainly, the Supreme Court weighed in the current situation, law and order situation in Delhi and neighboring states, and therefore has granted this extraordinary order.
So I think, Jeet, thanks for clarifying. I think the people are thinking that the parliament spent so much time in passing these laws, and then one fine day, few people will file a petition in the Supreme Court, and then Supreme Court will decide the fate of that law. So I think that is one thing that you have clarified very nicely, where you have said that very clearly that the Supreme Court is the ultimate custodian of any legal matter. So I think they have the complete jurisdiction in this area. But I also feel that they have not really, they have just put a stay on the laws. They have not said that, hey, these laws are unconstitutional. So it is for the benefit of both parties, where the government talks about their pros and cons, and the people who are protesting also talks about pros and cons about these laws, and ultimately the decision will be taken by Supreme Court. So I think that is something which you have explained very clearly. But what is the way forward from here? What is your opinion on this?
As I understand, the protests are with regards to repealing of these laws. Their demand is that these laws should be repealed. Now that the parliament, unless they pass another law, cannot repeal the laws which have been enacted. And I don't think the government wants these laws to be repealed. So in a way, this is a stalemate situation, and there is a deadlock.
Ultimately,
But ultimately,
the
it depends
decision
on
will be
how
taken by Supreme
effective
Court.
and
So I think
efficient
that is
this
something which
committee is have been
in
enacted. And I don't think convincing the members of both the sides in order to reach some conclusion. But I feel that ultimately only the Supreme Court will have to decide the validity of these laws, and the Supreme Court has the final say, and the matters would be argued. But in my opinion, I think the acts should have been implemented, and they should not have been stayed because it is not the entire country which is opposing these laws. It is some unions from some states who are opposing. Others are wanting these laws to be implemented. So only because there are protests going on and the protest cannot be stopped or cannot be managed, that should not be a ground for staying. And it is not as a precedent also because Supreme Court itself observes that this is an extraordinary order of stay. So certainly it is not to be applied in all cases or as it has to be used as a precedent. But I think Supreme Court in these facts thought it best to stay. That is what they've done. But otherwise, in my opinion, it should have been allowed to go on, to be implemented, to be seen its effects, pros, cons, so that the Supreme Court would have been in a better position to even judge the effects of the laws.
Jeet, thank you very much for joining us today morning, and especially in the north of India, it is quite cold. So I appreciate that you found time to explain this for the benefit of our viewers.
So thank you very much, Chandrakant, for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, dear viewers, as you can see that we're trying to bring clarity on this whole matter, and it is coming in the news every day. So, you please engage with us, send your comments, and based on your comments, we will include you live with our expert panel of expert headed by Jeet in the next episode of our legal matters. Until then, I'll like to say goodbye to you, Jeet, and also to all our viewers.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Chandrakant.
Hello, friends. This is Chandrakant from Akulmach Technologies, and welcome to Top Brass. Today, I would like to draw your attention to the major news which happened in the morning. By click of a button, our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, inaugurated our India's first undersea cable, which connects the mainland India with Andaman and Nicobar Island. The whole objective of this program was to provide broadband services into the island that we have, which is like almost like 3,000 kilometers, 2,700 and odd, up to 3,000 kilometers away from the mainland of India. And it is also one of the major port, also a naval base. So it was so important because rest of India is already covered in 4.5G in terms of bandwidth, but Andaman needed that. And in today's technology, the best way to do that is laying a fiber cable and start communication between two ends using the light or laser. So why this is so important? As you know that in the current century, the data will be the new gold, or data will be the new petroleum. So the data speed is absolutely essential for any country, or a country like India, to succeed and to become big economically and also otherwise. So we have to ensure that we follow the faster data, and we have to also provide connectivity to each and every citizen of India. So this is the first step, but let me take you on a tangent today by giving another piece of information what is going on in the world. And if you remember, recently SpaceX has been in the news for conducting the first manned flight, and two astronauts went to space, came back safely, and there was a splashdown or touchdown or splashdown, whatever you want to call it. I think so. This is a remarkable feat. The CEO of SpaceX, Elon Musk, the famous Google guy or the internet guy, whatever you want to call him, SpaceX is his enterprise, his company, and he is coming out with a new innovation. So while the world is looking at Huawei, or not looking at Huawei, talking about 5G, etc., we the Reliance Jio in India is trying to come out with their own version of 5G. But here is Elon Musk. He's thinking in such an innovative way, and his program is called Starlink. So in today's video, I would like to introduce you what Starlink is all about. So Starlink is basically, uh, number of satellites which cover the Earth. And why the satellites are better than a fiber cable? Because as some of the science students would know that the light travel with the speed of light, which is the fastest speed in vacuum. So if it flows through a medium like water or glass or something, it reduces this, the light speed comes down. So we already know by way of many experiments that the light's speed in glass is 40% less than the light speed in vacuum. So the best way to communicate using light or laser in space is the fastest way to communicate. So, as it is, if we are actually using light as a way of transmission, or laser light as way of transmission, that is the fastest way. It is even faster than fiber cable. So, if we have point A to point B, and when we send signal, so suppose between India and Andaman Nicobar, we send signal, there will be a lag and the speed drop of 40% between mainland and Andaman Nicobars. And within India, because India is a very large country, from south to north, if there is a cable which interconnects both areas, there is always a lag, there is always a delay in transmission of the data and the signal. The delay is not significant, but it could become significant if there are applications like stock exchange, where even every millisecond counts, the banking system where every millisecond counts. So the transaction has to happen, and the ramification, the impact of delay could be catastrophic, could be disaster. So therefore, we have to ensure that the delay is reduced, and hence this is one mechanism where we replace the fiber optics using laser lights. But we cannot replace the fiber optics using with a laser light on Earth. We have to go to the space. So the company, which is SpaceX, Elon Musk company, they have done a lot of analysis. They have said that if there is a satellite which is at 550 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, then uh, the speed of light can be maintained, and this satellite can cover certain areas. So I'll come to that in a moment. But the whole point is that you send satellite, which are low cost satellite, which will have only transmitters, the solar array to generate power, and some sort of engine to dislodge them in case of any emergency, so that they can be safely removed and replaced in future. So as per the estimate of the system, which is called Starlink system, it will have the ability to provide the broadband to each and every human being on the face of Earth, because they are transmitting from space. And the system is even faster than if you put a satellite. Like, a lot of countries have put their satellites in geostationary orbits, which are like 36,000 kilometers from the Earth. It's quite a distance. There is obviously there is a lag in the signal, and in fact, the fiber optics is faster than using the current day technology, satellite technology. So what Elon Musk is talking about, the satellite must be cheap. They should be plenty in number. They should be easy to launch. The launching vehicle, launching system should be cheap, and they should be able to cover a lot of human beings. So this Starlink system, if you do little research like I've done, you will find that there will be, as per the SpaceX estimate, 12,000 satellites are required to cover the entire globe. And these are going to cost very low, and will provide at very, very low cost broadband services to each and every human being on the face of the earth. And as I said, from the technology standpoint, it will have multiple transmission antennas. It will have very small machinery, because it is all based on transmission using lasers. So it will have laser generators. The laser can be generated, which is again low power, using the solar arrays. And it will have a krypton thruster. So krypton is a gas. They will use krypton thruster to dislodge the satellite in case they need to replace it, or in case if it is trying, if something goes wrong with the satellite, and it crashes on Earth. And one very important aspect about the system is all the satellites would be made of such a material that upon re-entry into Earth, 95% of the satellite material will get burned up. So it's going to be very safe. So first of all, using the krypton thrusters, you can aim them in the right direction. You don't have to see that a satellite is going to crash on uh, somebody house and all that, destroy it. So you can actually direct it in a no man's land, and at the same time, 95% of the material which will be used to prepare these satellites would get burned up in space. Now, once these satellites are in orbit at exactly 550 kilometers above Earth's surface, all of these satellites' trajectory will be controlled by a tracking software, which will ensure the health of these satellites. So, because it's software, it's not going to be very expensive machinery. It can be controlled from Earth. And the software will also ensure that since all of these satellites are rotating around the Earth at the height of 550 kilometers in different orbits, they also have an anti-collision system. It should not happen that the satellites collide with each other while they are in their orbit. So this is as far as this system is concerned. Let's look at the light as a mode of communication. As we know, in our home, in the broadband, there's a cable, which is a fiber cable that comes to our house, and from there it gets into Wi-Fi. So this is a current day technology, and the next wave is 5G, where uh, the lights, the microwave of the signals from the tower will get into sort of a beam, and it's a different topic altogether. But whole thing is that in 5G, it's a next level where these beams are not transmitted in the atmosphere. They are just concentrated into a very strong microwave beam and then transmitted directly into your home. So that is why 5G is a game changer. But Starlink is going to even beat the 5G in terms of speed, because 5G again would require a fiber cable to come to your house from some point. So the data, when it travels in space, it will be faster. So all these satellites will be interconnected using light. So they will transmit from point A when when the signal goes to the satellite, it will go in the form of light, and then within the satellite they will transmit within each other. So this transmission will be faster. It will be exactly in vacuum, so it will be faster than what it would be on Earth. So it is much faster than the cable. It is estimated to be 40%, almost 70% faster than the current day technology of using fiber cable. Because so far the human race knows the fiber cable is the best way of transmitting our data. The satellites will also use the non-moving parts. They use a very complex radar, which is also called phase array radar, which will use the natural tendency of these waves to interfere with each other, and thus it will create signal. So they can actually point the signal where they want, which part of the earth they want to go the signal, without any moving part. So these radars will be quite advanced, very low cost, but at the same time quite advanced and new tech. Now each of these satellites will transmit on earth in a cone. The signal will be like a cone, and the angle of the cone would be about 81 degrees. So when they are at 550 kilometers above the surface of the earth, technically they can cover an area of 500 kilometers on earth. So one satellite can cover up to 500 kilometers, and whoever in that area has a receiver can become part of the network or the internet. So the system, as I said earlier, the Starlink system uses a software which uh, covers the Earth. So each satellite, the software will also ensure that at any point in time, there one area would be covered by at least uh, four satellites, so that there is continuity of the signal. The signal will never go down, because satellites are rotating around Earth, but at any point in time there will be multiple satellites on single area. That is why there is a requirement of 12,000 satellites up in the space, and they will ensure that at any time the four satellites are interconnected with each other. So they are managing one particular type of data, so that while the data is coming very fast using lasers, at the same time there is continuity, because satellites move out and they keep transmitting like a relay race. They keep changing their signal. So if one satellite move from this area to other, there will be one more coming in here, and at any point in time there will be four satellites catering to one area of 500 kilometers. So there will be automatic switching happening between satellites, and this is will be controlled completely using earth stations, using smart tracking softwares, and so on. So this is going to be very fast system, going to be very low cost. You don't have to lay expensive cable under the ocean. You don't have to have a router in your home. You don't have to lay cable across the length and breadth of your city. It will all come from the sky, and it will be wireless. So how people will use this system? Basically, they'll have to just get a receiver, put it on the roof of the house, and then all the devices get connected to that receiver. Now, the beauty of the system is that since this receiver is very low cost, and it is being provided information through the satellites, it can be mobile also. So you can Any individual can buy this receiver for his personal or official use, put it on the house, or also put it on his car or a truck and move around with it. So, say for example, if you're living in a house and you're going on vacation, you can take your receiver with you. So you will never go out of internet wherever you are. This system is so remarkable. It promises every human being to be connected to the internet because you don't have to lay cables anywhere, wherever, whichever part of Earth you are. And even after interconnecting every human being on Earth, there will be plenty of bandwidth available. And the system will be at least 40% faster than the fastest system available today. So, in terms of cost saving, SpaceX has already designed these satellites, already had two launched, where they have successfully launched certain satellites and testing is going on. They have their own launching system, which is Falcon 9 rocket, tested. Even they had manned mission also recently. So this is very efficient launching system. It is almost 70% cheaper than NASA. So we have to see whether ISRO systems are cheaper or Falcon 9 systems are cheaper. That is something that is debatable. We will discuss on in some other day. But SpaceX, being a private organization, has their own system. They have their own satellite. They have figured out the whole method, and this is promising. Starlink is such a big promise that it is going to offer faster speed than 5G itself, and the whole transmission is based on light waves, which is not harmful to any living thing, to humans, to animals, to plant life. Unlike 5G, which concentrate the microwaves, very high frequency